everybody. It's good to have you here. My name is Kelechi Njoku, and I'm your host for this panel, which is titled Demystifying Royalties, a guide for publishers and authors. It's really nice to see you, Dr. Egosa. Nice to connect with you, Keziah. Um, one of our guests or one of our potential guests, Miss Sandra, isn't here. She there's unrest in Mozambique, so she won't be able to join us. So hopefully she continues to stay safe, and I guess we can talk to her some other time. Yeah, so this is going to be a very exciting conversation. I personally like talking about money, especially when it comes to books. This is really like my comfort zone. I like talking about money, contracts, that sort of thing. So I'm really looking forward to learning a lot from your expertise because I'm more on the editorial and writing side, and you guys are kind of like on the business side of things. So this should be very exciting. So before we go on, permit me to just do a brief introduction of the panelists, unless you'd like to do it yourselves. Would you like me to introduce you? Okay, great.
Please,
All
I'd like
right.
to hear what I sound like from. I would love to hear how you see me.
How you sound in a bio, right? Great. Our first panelist is Dr. Egosa Imaswan. He's a co-founder and executive director, business development at Narrative Landscape Press Limited, which is an independent publishing firm that has produced acclaimed writers such as Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Oyinkan Braithwaite, Marlon James, Lupita Nyong'o, Yejide Kilanko, Chibundu Onuzo, and so many other people. He's a medical doctor turned writer and publisher. He served as Chief Operations Officer at Kachifo Limited from 2013 to 2016. His first novel was published by the Farafina imprint of Kachifo Limited in 2008, and his second novel, Fine Boys, which was published by the Farafina imprint again, has sold over 34,000 copies and was acquired recently by the Ohio University Press in the US. This happened in 2021. Welcome again, Dr. Egosa. And Keziah is
Thank you
a
so much. Thank
yeah.
you for having me.
Keziah Agbenyega is a seasoned communications and publishing professional with over a decade's experience in the publishing and non-profit sectors. Her expertise encompasses programmatic work, research, copy editing, editorial project management, and publishing, where she has consistently achieved impactful results. Throughout her career, Keziah has successfully led diverse teams in executing content creation, writing, and editorial project management projects, all while fostering a deep love for reading and actively engaging audiences with books. Now, driven by her passion for storytelling and literature, she is dedicated to amplifying voices and forging meaningful connections between readers and authors. Thank you, Keziah, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think we're just going to dive right in. And my very first question is a very introductory question, just laying the ground for everything we're going to discuss. So before we just jump into discussing the technicalities and the details around royalties, Dr. Egosa, can you just tell us what are royalties and how exactly do they work?
So, in very simple terms, royalties are the percentage of sales that an author earns from each book sold.
Okay.
It's one of those in basic sentences, and it's the basis for all of publishing, traditional publishing, so to speak, where the business, the producer, in this case, the publisher, has received a grant of rights, not bought the rights, although we use bought the rights as shortcut, and is therefore paying royalties on each sale to the author for granting them the privilege to exploit those rights. So I think that's just normally there are tight differences that we can get into later. Usually, this takes into account other costs of production. So royalties tend to be a percentage. Of course, from the publisher's point of view, they are thinking of production costs, trade discounts, and the rest. But royalties are what are specifically for the author.
Fantastic. So my next question is for the both of you. I'm going to begin with Keziah, and then I'm going to move to you, Dr. Egosa. And so what are the critical elements authors should look out for when reviewing a royalty agreement? So what are the clauses an author should look out for?
Yeah. I believe an author should focus one on the rates that they are being offered, the percentage, and then the basis of the royalty, whether it is retail or it is on its net. And then if it's an advance royalty, the amount should come into consideration, and then the payment schedule, whether they're going to be paid upfront, you're going to be paid after you submit the manuscript, or whether you're going to be paid after a certain number of copies are sold. Those are things that you need to look out for. Aside that, one thing that I feel is very critical these days is the subsidiary rights. And some authors that I have come into contact with do not really pay attention to those. And it gives publishers quite a very broad room to work with. Like by subsidiary rights, I mean audiobook rights, movie or film rights, and probably other derivatives of the word translations and other things. I think that it's important to negotiate all those things at the beginning so that you don't go ahead and start the contracts and then realize that, oh, I could have had this or that, and now I don't have it. Yeah.
Although to add to that, and this will come up when we get to negotiations, it's
Yeah.
slowly becoming a seller's market in that there are more publishers chasing a limited talent
Mhm.
of a limited pool of talent. And what you will find out most times is that behind the admonishments and advice to check your terms, most times it's just for self-edification because they're really very thin margins for negotiations when it comes to those rights. And most times what you find happening is that an educated author is actually a lot easier to negotiate with.
Yeah.
So for example, one of the most important things we will look at is one of the major terms is it based on the cover price or the list price, or since we don't have price controls, we use recommended retail price, or is it based on net receipts? Now, several cheeky publishers will use net receipts and start applying trade discounts against the revenue that you earn. Of course, in that case, your royalty margin should be 15%, 17%, because you are behind cost. In the preference of in pidgin English, we will say in the preference of Onibese, who they are owing, instead of you to be at the top, you put yourself a bit lower. So then you should go higher. But if it's based on the cover price, you are aware that several chunks of that money is going to be taken by different entities. So therefore, your percentage can be more fair. In essence, what I'm describing is this. So if you go back to what price control is, several more stable economies have this idea of price control, which is built into the way books are sold. So therefore, the air-conditioned larger bookshops command a larger trade discount so that they can still sell your book for $10. Meanwhile, the roadside bookshop is taking a less trade discount so they can still sell your book for 10,000. In Nigeria, we don't have that. In Nigeria, what you have is that if you do that 10,000, recommended retail price is what you do. You're advising people, oh, but sell this bottle of Coke for 100 naira. But the person who has a nightclub where he's paying police to guard it and is doing air condition and he has a musician coming, you will sell that 10 naira, 100 naira bottle for 500 naira. Now, you do not want the author coming to the publisher so that, but you said this cover price, like the book is 500 naira in ShopRite. You're like, that is not how much I told them to sell it. That is not how much they bought it for me in terms of retail price. So we use recommended retail price and also say that, this is what we are retailing your book. So based on the recommended retail price, the author gets a percentage. That is the fairest system. And most times, if you use the new accounting systems that demand that trade discount become an expense, is actually the fairest, because the amount at which the book shows in our inventory is the recommended retail price. That's the value that it shows as part of our plus side. Therefore, then we now apply trade discounts, which are the first expenses to go. Then we've already promised an author that we're going to give you 12% of the recommended retail price. then we give them their money. But if the author, the point I was making was that one, the advice is important when we get there to know, but you will
Okay.
end up becoming too reasonable at times. That's the side effect. The author becoming
Mm.
more aware of the intricacies of the business is actually a much more comfortable person to negotiate with. While you're defining, but meanwhile, the unreasonable author is like, what do you mean 15%? I want 25. Most, most
Yeah.
times,
Yeah.
Yeah.
most times they end up getting what they want, or they don't get published, or they run into trouble by meeting a publisher who doesn't know what he's doing. Says,
Yeah.
sure,
I've
and it
been in
never
such
happens.
meetings. Yeah.
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 I tend to totally agree with that. And I feel like for authors who are now starting out, if you ask me, I would ask that you should get some education on that and probably get a literary agent to do this aspect of the negotiation for you, because otherwise you're going in expecting so much, but then you
Yeah.
don't understand the intricacies of what exactly goes into producing the book or bringing the book out.
Yeah. That's very true. Dr. Egosa, I want to just stay a bit on something you said. You said something about it, when we touched on subsidiary rights, you said something about it being a seller's market. Can you elaborate on that?
I would this is which one is the one where the seller has power? So in this case, the seller is
Is
the
the
author,
author?
yeah? Yeah,
Okay.
so exactly. So most times you find out that there are many more publishers, many more people with passion, especially in our industry, who are getting into this space.
Okay.
And there's also this idea that there's been this renewed interest in intellectual property securitization that is happening
Right.
parallel to everything that's happening. Kenya did their own law in 2015, 2016. Nigeria did
Mm.
their own law. That was the law that the former Minister of Information in Nigeria was advertising that Nollywood filmmakers can now borrow money based on the film, which is
Okay.
kind of an oversimplification. It's kind of the apotheosis of oversimplification of what is really, really a vibrant and exciting new space. It also relates to the African Continental Free Trade Area and what Afreximbank and other Pan-African entities are doing, Creatives African
Okay.
Nexus. There's this idea that your intellectual property enabling laws have been established across many AU member states that allow you to actually securitize it and use it as a basis to get investments or borrow money. So in other words, there's an increased interest in IP. So now when it comes to subsidiary, but the problem is that when it comes to subsidiary rights, there are certain conventions that make the conversation straightforward. So from
Okay.
the point of view of a publisher that is growing or that is growing their portfolio, and this is what also enables us not to make mistakes. So they are thinking convention, 25% ebook, 50% other subsidiary rights. Audiobook rights, no, we want the audiobook rights. We will exploit the audiobook rights. We have an audiobook publisher, so we're not giving it out. So it's not a subsidiary right in this sense. It's
Yeah.
embedded in what we do. Now, the issue is that so when we get a specialized author whose agent is really, really aggressive and we're really hungry for that part, there's a risk that we forget that while everybody is 50%, that
Mm.
Jessica Kanunga who was represented by this shark of an agent is actually on 65%. It's a procedural thing. It can get really, really exhausting. So at times you actually see publishers will like, too much trouble. And it's not too much trouble because they want to cheat. It's not too much trouble because they don't want to make
Yeah.
mistakes when it eventually happens. So the point I was making is that the conventions exist not mostly for convenience,
Yeah.
and tradition, but you will get an agent who can put a 5% on top, who can push it back. But there are
Mm.
certain margins that don't change. So subsidiary rights, to speak to those who, since we're trying to demystify it, are rights that you assign to the publisher if you
Yes.
want to, that are not their primary domain of exploitation. So the publisher is basically going to do paperback and hardcover. Now the publisher now tells you that, by the way, if another publisher comes to you and says they want to do a book club edition, a Reader's Digest edition, a cheap edition that they want to do, a trade paperback book, cheap edition, co-edition, I will give them the rights, and any money that they pay me and you will share it 50. So that's the 50% subsidiary rights for, you could have book club edition, you could have book club rights. If somebody comes and says, I like this paragraph, I want to put this paragraph in the New Yorker, I will give you $200 for that excerpt. Me and you will share 50. So the subsidiary rights, if somebody says that, okay, yeah, they want to make a film, and you told me say 90 blank papers, you know what? I don't have the energy to engage. I just want to focus on my writing. If I
Yeah.
negotiate it and get it done, the film rights reside with us, the publishers. Whatever money comes from the option fee, maybe $1,000, $10,000 or so, we'll split it 50-50. We'll make sure we negotiate the best thing for you. By the time that comes, we'll split it 50-50. So it is the things that the publisher cannot do that they will give to others to do. The same thing that happens with translation rights. If somebody translation rights are kind of weird in that there's a lot of support for them and the rest in terms of different countries are pushing their languages so you can get translation grants in different publishers can and book scouts are actually no longer agents. Book scouts working for publishers are the ones now seeking books for translation. So the book scout industry is something else that maybe in a different publishing
We
conversation.
definitely should talk about that in a different
But
edition.
yeah, but that is like Kezia will know that is the dance. So most times for convenience, there are certain conventions. You will see it will be 2 paragraphs. Most likely they will define what the subsidiary rights are. That's when you take things out. Then they'll put 1 rate for the subsidiary rights. Then the things that are not normally among the ebooks are a special kind of subsidiary right. So they're normally cited at 25% or 35% or 50%, very rarely 50%. Although we have an author whom you can guess is on 70% subsidiary right. So because there's no cost, we are not marketing anything. We cannot make part and say no, but we're printing the ebook. Dude, you're not printing any ebook. It's my name, easy to sell it. So in that sense, just okay, no wahala, take the 70%. But most times it's 35, 25 to 35, 25 to 35. Other subsidiaries is 50%. So either you say, I don't want to give you the subsidiary right, then the publisher might walk away because most times you'll find out that the print edition in our region is not enough to offset the amount of money that the publisher plans to invest. Most publishers who are coming in plan to do things for you and hold on to those rights so that they can leverage for other conversations and earn. And you, most times, you don't want to be distracted by having to engage that aspect. So there's this
with all of these
small
other
Nigerian,
opportunities.
exactly, focus on your writing. So it's in that dance. But if you have the energy, sure, that's where the subsidiary rights conversation comes.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you for that detailed explanation. So I'm just going to ask, so quickly, can the both of you just walk me through any common misconceptions authors and publishers have about royalties, and perhaps just clarify a few? Because I'll just begin with you and then move to Dr. Agusa.
Okay, so misconceptions. Because I usually deal with authors who are quite starting up, I think 2 that readily come to mind is that higher royalties on paper means higher earnings, and advances are free money. So some authors feel like once they've gotten an advance, oh yeah, I have cashed out. So I'm good. Let me go and sleep. But if you've received an advance, I feel that is even worse for me because it means that it puts a lot of pressure on you to deliver. So in a case where you have writer's block or there's something happening and you can't produce the book, you are a lot more under pressure than somebody who is getting royalties on probably sales. And sometimes higher royalties on paper doesn't necessarily mean higher earnings. Because if for instance, a publisher has said, I'm going to give you 70% of all net revenue, they haven't told you about all the things that they have to pay for. So probably trade discounts, giving discounts to publishers, sometimes even giving out free books. And a lot of publishers sometimes tend to put a bit of these things here and there, even though they have given you a very high figure, they would still chip in some things here and there, which is fair if you think about it from the publisher's point of view, But so it just my point, it goes to my points that if the royalty figure is high, it doesn't necessarily mean you're earning so much money out of it. And also, I also feel like sometimes authors write books and feel like that's the way to make a lot of money. That's the way to get rich.
Mhm.
And that's a misconception I feel like shouldn't be topmost on their minds, because books are quite interesting things. You could produce a book which is good, it may sell, but for some reason it may not sell, or it may take time to pick up on the market. So I mean, I think these are the three that come to mind readily.
Yeah, so before I come to Dr. Egosa, the part about advances, right? I've heard stories about right, authors having to return advances to publishers. Is that something that happens with you? I mean, I'm asking this question because Nigeria is a very unique situation. So, for example, we typically don't pay advances in the Nigerian publishing scene. It's just, yeah. So,
It's
have you?
changing.
Oh,
It's
it's
changing.
changing.
Oh.
Wow.
Since you left, they are killing us here. For real.
Wow. Okay, I think I need to come back then
I
too.
told you it's a seller's market. It's a seller's market. It is
Okay, okay.
changing.
Have you ever experienced any situation where authors had to return advances? Because
Not really, because even though it's changing in Ghana, I haven't encountered any situation where an
Mhm.
author had to return an advance. Um, because most publishers here don't pay advances. I mean, Nigeria's publishing industry is like light years sort of ahead of Ghana, and we are slowly catching up because we are still heavily in the educational publishing area. And usually when that is where advances are paid. And because it's quite a technical area, um, most of the time they deliver. They don't,
Yeah.
I haven't heard of a situation where it had to be returned. And sometimes I think the contracts would determine whether it should be returned or not.
Okay.
And I think if I am a publisher, I'll definitely ensure that there is a clause that says if the writer doesn't deliver, they have to return my money. As to whether the author would accept it or not is a different story.
A different story. So yeah, Dr. Egosa, misconceptions
It,
about
it, it,
real.
no, to go back then, I'll enter the misconceptions.
Okay.
So the phrase is that advances are recoupable, not refundable.
Mm,
Now,
Okay.
so most times, so it depends on, so if you have a two-book deal, there's a way it goes into your payables. So the way we usually record it on our accounting system is
Mm.
we raise the bill, we pay the advance, then we delete the bill. So your account is in red. And as your royalty statements are entering, as we're entering your royalty statements, we engage, we do our royalties on a twice a year basis, every 6 months. Once we raise the next set of royalty reports, then we raise the bill, that cancels it, then we send the royalty report, which is just a statement of an account, shows it being cut down. In Nigeria, we are leaning towards $300, 500, basically 500,000 naira advances and above. Then for setting us $500 to $1,000 advances, it's beginning to happen, and it's a way to. The problem is that very few earn it back. It takes a while, but at least you are free, and it's just a royalty report that you're using to settle the person. And like I said, it's a seller's market. If a publisher wants to risk a refundable advance, the gist will go round. Remember that once you start it, you kind of don't want to stop because you will make a mistake in your own process. So it's kind of this is the publishing contracts tend to lean towards being terms of service, in
Mm.
that the margins for negotiations are known between agents. The margins, and once an author has done it enough, he knows that what people are dragging is 2%, 2.5%, 0.5%. That's what
Yeah.
you're dragging. Terms like any publisher that does net receipts at all is doing net receipts most likely for all their contracts. If you're able to negotiate with them to do as a basis point to do recommended retail price, they're going to make mistakes with your royalty reports because the accountant is doing net receipts for everybody and miss that. So certain things that are red flags for a reason. You hear somebody discuss net receipts for traditional publishing, it should scare you. Why should you be involved in that? Especially if they're not discussing something like 12%, or if they're discussing, unless they're discussing 50% of net receipts. Or how there was a name you called it Keziah, but I think it's the same thing, net receipts, where
yeah.
trade discounts have been expensed, certain production costs have been expensed. So this is where this publisher works. Then it should be 50-50 because that is akin to subsidiary rights
Yeah.
that we're discussing. The publisher is
Yeah.
taking their production funds out, taking this out, taking this out, and say, okay, this is the money that we're going to earn. Oh, we'll split. It cannot be doing 15%. So in terms of what do you call misconceptions that most publishers, most writers have, is that how large the volume of what fraction of the eventual retail price is theirs. You have a bet because you've been working on this for the last 3 to 4 years. Your book has come out, and somebody's one individual is telling you that your royalty is 10%. They're like, what the how? Then eventually they tell you. So make it, for example, let's use the dream cost of a 10,000 naira retail hardcover.
Mm-hmm.
So justify that hardcover price of 10,000 naira, we have to make sure that production is below 30% of that eventual retail price. So our production cost has to be 3,000 naira or below, which, if you are printing and you print at $2, that's already 3,200 landing cost without clearing and forwarding. So let us say 3,000 naira for you to be able to sell a book for 10,000 naira. Then trade discounts. Bookshops take between 20 to 40%. Bookshops and distributors. The bookshop so if you're selling the book for 10,000 naira, you put 10,000 naira in the invoice of the bookshop, trade discount 20%. Bookshop will pay you 8,000 naira eventually when they make a sale or return or eventually. Then if it's a distributor, the distributor will collect that book at 6,000 naira. You put 10,000 naira minus 40% discount, shop will now collect it at 6,000 naira. Which means that 40% plus 30% production, it is 30% that you and the author are now sharing. You have air condition, NEPA, hungry editors to pay. So you can, and you have only a shortened amount of time to hold on to the book, which is 5 years to 10 years. So you tell the author, yeah, sure, I'll give 10% of that. I hold on to 20% of revenue. Or we'll split it 15-15. Or when the eventual trade paperback comes back, when I need to become thinner, your royalty will drop to about 7 or 12%. Or when I cross 12,000 copies, I know that the book is a thing and my costs have reduced, I will increase your royalties again. So there are many staggered ways in which to present it, and to also reassure you what is the function of advances when we eventually get there. The function of an advance is for the author, and that's another misconception. Why the advance? The advance is the publisher promising you that I will not let your book suffer.
Yeah.
Because it's not so much the contract. The publisher is promising, okay, you know what? When an agent is negotiating advances, you will hear things like the agent asks, so how many copies do you plan to produce? Yeah. You want to do 2,000. You will not tell him 2,000. Let him not go and kill you. You say it's about 1,000 copies. The guys, and how much will you retail it for? You say I'll retail it for 3,000. Oh, it's calculated 3,000 times 10, so that's 3 million. 3 million as 10%, that's 300,000. Okay. Would you mind paying an advance of 400,000? Now, he didn't calculate that into your hearing. He calculated it inside, but you've cut him because you know what he was doing. You are not calculating your auto. You say, I said, no, we'll do 200,000. So the advance on royalties is a justifiable sum that the publisher is guaranteeing the author that in these 20 books I'm publishing this year, I will try to recoup every single penny. And recouping every single penny is making sure that your book is out there. And making sure your book is out there also speaks to another misconception that the book will not feed you. The money is too small. What will eventually feed you are the doors the book will open for. So you must also diversify your income as an author. You must, speaking engagements, somebody will come and write an essay. They will first put it for free because they want to give you access. Then they go punish you. But those are the three main things I see: the actual value of royalties and why, the function of the advance, and the idea that this book will become a bestseller and it will feed you. It likely will not. It will open doors.
Yeah.
Can I add something? Something came to my mind.
Yes,
so one thing that I realize is very common here in Ghana, especially because it's self-publishing. We don't have a lot of publishers who are doing trade books. It's increasing. It's growing by the day, but you find authors self-publishing a lot. And one of the reasons they would give you is if I self-publish, then I get a lot of royalties, so I get higher earnings. And usually that's not true. The fact that you're self-publishing means that you're bearing all the costs of maybe you're not producing, your production cost is not that high, but you're bearing the cost of marketing, you're bearing the cost of distribution, you're bearing every other aspects of making sure your book is at the forefront of people and selling. But if a publisher were to do this for you, you'd take a step back and they would take the cost of all these things as well as give you your royalties at the end of the day. So sometimes when you do the math, it doesn't always add up
Yeah.
to show that self-publishing gets you more royalties than when you go the traditional route.
Yeah. And it's actually
And
even
and
not even
and
royalties,
you are not
it's
writing.
direct
You are not writing when you
profit.
and you're not writing when you're chasing bookshops.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not writing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I
Exactly.
mean, there are pros and cons, and I guess we can talk about that in another edition. So before we slide a bit away from this line of questioning, I'd like to know what are the red flags you have seen in royalty negotiations? And I'd like you to also kind of like consider the African situation, how different it is from how publishing works in the West. So, what are red flags authors should be wary of when they are reviewing their royalty contracts?
So one major red flag for me, which is something I tell almost every author I work with, is please read the contract.
Okay.
We have people or authors or content creators, and put it that way, who do not read the contracts and sometimes do not understand or do not see some of the clauses. And at the end of the day, they come back and they're like, I didn't know this. But that is not the fault of the publisher. It was your job to read the contract and make sure you understand it. Suggest changes, negotiate on the terms, which they're usually free to do, and make sure that you are comfortable before moving forward. That is a big red flag for me, not reading the agreement or not reading the contract.
Mm. All
Um,
right. Dr.
for
Gus.
yeah, for me, I think I made the mistake of leading with most of my red flags, so I'll have to go back to them. So one, as an author, um, looking at a contract is haste. If I'm being hurried along, if the publisher, if there's any hint of pressure, it's a red flag. If there's any hint of outrage or impatience, now impatience will occur because I'm an impatient person, but most times it's a softer kind of impatience. It's like, oh my God, this guy doesn't know what to do. Most publishers will be smiling and you know that they're laughing at you. I say, okay, trust us, please take your time, look at it. Anybody who seems to pressure you, fear it. And always be aware that there are places online and places everywhere where you can do a reputation check. Um, now and also those are the kind of things. Watch out for those things. Watch out for net receipts versus cover price. Not so much red flags in themselves, but what they mean and the effect they have on your publishing. So some publishers will apply trade discount, which is the discount that the publisher gives to a bookshop, and just say
Mm,
that whatever people pay is what we will use to calculate royalties, whatever we get to use to calculate royalties. If that
okay.
is fair, so long as you know it is defined, the most important thing is that know what the publisher is telling you.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
terms will likely not change. Like I said, publishers tend to go for convenience so they do not make mistakes. And
Mhm.
because it's a seller's market, you can walk away and go to a publisher who is offering what you are looking for. Because it is very difficult for the publisher to make a unique change of terms for you in the
Yeah.
larger picture than just your royalty rates. If a publisher is doing net or trade discounts, it's not going to change your own to cover price. It is
Mm-hmm.
just what it is. So you can negotiate the rates based on that. Now, from a publisher's point of view, um, from publisher's point of view, red flags are, it starts from the submission stage. If I've never ever had a good experience with somebody who felt that their manuscript was the best manuscript ever and was going to win an award. Never. The editing was hell after the contract, which took forever to sign. So most times it's a, a lack of self-awareness scares me. Most times I like that healthy
Very true.
dose of skepticism. There's a healthy amount of skepticism that one must have in their own talent. There's a way
Yeah.
to say, are you sure? Oh, that's so pleasant. And it helps because most times the person is slightly more reasonable within fair limits. And so those
Yeah.
are the major. Then yeah, I think that's it. Then in terms of operationalism, in terms of operations itself, not really a red flag, but difficulties. Working across borders can be really hell. Working with agents who
Mm-hmm.
do not understand that, okay, we'll pay your author who is Nigerian in Naira, send you the royalty report. So you can apply your 15% agency and collect from their returns that are coming to you in dollars from other publishers.
Mm-hmm.
If an agent is unreasonable and doesn't get it, makes the job quite difficult. So most times we just, yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. So my next question is going to touch on audiobooks and ebooks, right? So I'm just curious, how has the growth of audiobooks and ebooks influenced traditional royalty models, especially in Nigeria and Ghana? Dr. Egosa, and then
Yeah, I was dodging that big one. So the one I'm trying to dodge is one in mind. Okay, so um, not much has changed.
Mhm.
Audiobook production is becoming a thing specifically because as publishers and as fans of audiobooks, we are kind of tired of the Wakanda coming to America accent. So audiobook production companies are, the West African accent is kind of really different, especially the
Mm,
West Central African accent, which is akin to our sisters and our siblings in
Preach.
Ghana, but we know how we tease the Ghanaian accent ourselves. So the West Central African accent is weird in that we are here, but the closest people who have our natural accent speak French in Cameroon and they speak French in Benin. So, or
Mm.
they speak French in the Congo. So our accent is as an isolate in most media. So if you listen to um, any of Chimamanda's audiobooks that are not performed by Nigerians now, recently Adeperu Ojoye is beginning to do it, and we're reaching up here in the UK. She's doing
Oh,
Nigerian
okay.
voices,
That's great
and
because
they're
I like.
brilliant. But for a long time, it was Ajoando, the
Ugh.
Duchess, and God bless her, she's brilliant. But when she gets to the Igbo words, yes, it is painful. Even it is painful. And so it's that situation where there's an increase. I was just trying to explain the increased interest in audiobook production here. And by that, that means that there's an ability for us to now produce audiobooks. There's an entity like Genti Media in
Mhm.
Nigeria. And also there was a company in Ghana that was really famous. They were working
Yeah,
with a
Akobo.
Swedish entity.
Yeah,
Yes, exactly. And it's the same issue, authentic voices. Fans
yeah.
of audiobooks are the ones founding this company. They're the
Mhm.
ones founding this company. Because for a long time, what was making audiobooks really difficult was you couldn't fit them into a compact disc because there were thousands of files. Then MP3 files came along. It wasn't how do you sell it when everybody can copy it? Then streaming came along. Streaming became possible in the last decade.
Mm.
So it is now a possible stream of revenue. Genti has the ability to directly acquire rights from us and produce and sell. And we're beginning to now retain or demand those audiobook rights and also retain regionality in how they're distributed. Because if you
Mm.
go to Audible, Audible can ask for an Audible exclusive, which means that your royalty rate will be slightly higher, but you can only find it on Audible.
Mm.
Or when we deal with regional rights for like with Mr. Dichi and the rest, we are now trying to, for a long time, it was the only rights that could carve out regionally were the ebooks and the book club rights and the paperback rights. We are now
Yeah.
beginning to ask them, please carve out audiobook rights. So the conversation
Okay.
is beginning to move and we can now exploit those audiobook rights where people abroad cannot buy the audiobooks, but Nigerians can buy the audiobooks. So it's in those thin spaces that the
Yeah.
conversations are happening. But in terms of the royalty conversation, is just the ability to say, okay, we would also like to have access to that subsidiary because we have an
Mhm.
ability to exploit it now.
Mhm.
So
The
it's
royalties
growing.
conversations
That's
are
what
not.
you're saying.
It is still 50%. Don't go and tempt these authors. It hasn't changed. The money is still 50%. But our ability to exploit it is
Yeah,
improving. So it
as
is a good thing
improved.
to live with us, yes.
Yeah, that's great to hear because the last contracts I saw, those audiobooks parts were just like for decoration, like let's just be there. There was
Yeah.
just no move to exploit them. Keziah, what's your experience here?
I mean, it's growing. It's growing here as well. It hasn't been really big because I
Mhm.
don't think Ghana has a huge market for audiobooks, even though we have an indigenous company producing audiobooks. But it's catching on, and it presents authors, as Dr. Igosa said, it presents authors as another um revenue stream, authors and publishers another revenue stream. And it gives all the people in the book chain the platform to explore another aspect of producing a book. For Ghana, as to whether it will catch up, I am not so sure.
Mm.
Previous workplace, it was really huge because it was a digital book platform, so it was mainly ebooks and audiobooks. And we did have challenges with languages, with no, the accents, even in Africa. So one book, we would have to produce different variations of the audiobooks for different markets. And that also increased the production costs. And then it would affect the royalties that we pay. So it's I think it's growing. It's a growing market. It's an ongoing conversation. But it has influenced traditional royalty payments quite a bit, and
Mm.
it's improving. So maybe in the next few years we'll see it being exploited much more. I currently do not know any Ghanaian publisher of a young adult trade book who has um exploited that, even though I see it in some of their contracts.
Okay.
Most of them are doing it for children's books.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. So this you said something about the same audiobook being produced for different markets because of accents. Can you elaborate on that a bit? I'm trying to understand how that works.
Okay, so just simple example. In Nigeria, you would say doctor.
Okay. Yeah.
Ghana, you would say doctor.
Ah,
So
okay.
even though Nigerians and Ghanaians are so close, and there's a debate on who is right,
Yeah.
we have a lot of
Church
similarities.
versus church.
Yes, church
Yeah.
versus we
Okay.
have a lot of similarities. We have a lot of things in common. But then if
Yeah.
we're producing an audiobook for
Mm.
a Ghanaian market, these little things that seemingly are not really significant, even though there's still a social media
Hmm.
debate on it between Ghanaians and Nigerians, because that's what we like to do,
Yeah.
debate who is better on everything. It will affect the listening. And don't forget that with an
Mm.
audiobook, the person or the reader is listening to the book. They don't get a chance to see um the words. So if those things are there, and for instance, if it's a child, then it affects their understanding in a lot of ways. So
Mm.
we've had to, that's one of the main reasons why we had to produce books with different accents for different markets. And then
Mm.
the other challenge we had there was finding indigenous people to do the translations, to do the recordings, sorry. So
Okay.
for instance, we had to use a Ghanaian who was based in the US
Okay.
do some of the audiobooks for the Ghanaian market. It came with quite a lot of challenges because her accent, she grew up there, she's based there. So it's not as if it's not like me who has lived here almost all my life, my formative years, and has moved there and I'm doing the translations. At least I'm bound to get it a little closer than
Hmm.
if we are put together. So those are like some of the little things that makes the audio market a bit, not, I won't say challenging, but a bit different and
Yeah.
more involving than just producing a simple ebook or producing a traditional paperback or hardback book.
All right. That's very interesting. Thank you. So my next question is about sales and market trends. I'm asking this question from the perspective where we're looking at, the size of the reading market in Africa and, just all the challenges that go into selling even just one book in that market, right? So I'm wondering, right, how much do data such as sales performance and market trends what role do they play in determining royalties, or how authors and publishers negotiate these things? And I want to add, because the publishing industry is perhaps the only business in the world that's quite forgiving on the money end of things. So how would you respond to that?
I think from where I sit and in my experience, data insights and sales performance have really been quite influential in how
Mhm,
much royalties we pay. So, in my previous workplace, World Reader, if we are working with an author or a publisher who has like really a book that has sold in a lot of markets and is
mm,
doing very well, chances that the ebook royalty payments would be higher than the usual or higher than the norm, is is high. Let me put it that way. Like your chances are higher if you have like data showing that my books are really doing well in these markets and that market. So we I think at a point in time we even had a bestseller. So we call it a bestseller list or award-winning list. And it doesn't
okay.
necessarily have to win an award, but once you can prove to us that I have this book, it's doing so well in Ghana or in Kenya or in the whole of Africa, and you are bound to get a number of readers or this amount of readers if you publish the e-version on your platform, the royalties we are going to pay you will definitely be higher than somebody who just comes in and doesn't really have much data or does nothing really showing the market trends or the sales performances of those books.
Okay, go, sir.
So for us, like I said, so I think I will we are also demystifying. You can hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you
Good.
very clearly.
Good. We are also demystifying royalties for publishers too, for independent presses. So
Mm,
and one of the things I always tell those who are starting out is create create sustainable royalty agreements. In Pidgin English, it's we do where your power reach,
mhm,
and make sure that you are able to pay those royalties based on your numbers. So what you find, like I said, is that the conversations are really within very thin margins. So your
mm,
royalties could be the same, but your commitment per an advance will be larger. So you pay more in an advance. Because, like I said, operationalizing that agreement is where it becomes uncomfortable and you find yourself making mistakes as you go. It's happened to us. If we're on
mm,
12.5% for somebody and every other person is on 11% or 12%, we just say, you know what, 12%, we can't really do much. Because the next thing, accountants change, somebody's working on the spreadsheet and expanding and just goes to go and send the royalty report and embarrasses the company. You get this harsh email from an agent and you're scrambling, although it's an inconvenience more so than a crime. So,
mhm,
in terms of what sales trends do with your royalty reports, the only way we can put that or account for that in an agreement is to say this is the royalty for your first 10,000 copies, so 10%. If once you cross 10,000 from the 10,001 copy, your royalties go up to 12.5%. Once you cross 17,000 copies, your royalties peak at 15%. Then, of course, you have the ability to renegotiate the terms of this contract in about 2 years. And you can come up and say,
mm.
okay, this thing has done a lot better. Then you can follow us to drag the terms. Of course, but
New
the
terms.
term and contract tenures are shortening. It used to be 10 years. It's now between 7 to 5 years. So because I
Mm,
think there's this
okay.
idea that
Yeah.
publishers can turn around or you can thrive or fail. And so, unlike the typical 10-year contract, most times you will rarely get an agent that can negotiate anything larger than 7 years on behalf
Mm,
of their authors. Like I said,
yeah.
there are a lot more now before consolidation happens, which is inevitable in an industry such as ours. There are a lot of publishers out there who are working with this idea that there's a vibrancy in African storytelling and
Mhm,
more authors are being ported, right? So you can we get into quiet on champion unheralded bidding matches with our friends at
mhm,
Masobe, with our friends at Paresha, at Kachifo. It's happening. So anytime you hear that Masobe announces a new author, you come to our office, we are cursing in our office. Damn it. So anytime you hear that we announce it, it's the same to nobody now. Wow, how did they do it? It's inevitable, but it's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's what the industry is. But in terms of sales trends, it's a larger discussion. In terms of what it looks like in practice, it's in those places like your advanced, the places that we can do and put out of mind and focus on our business.
Yeah.
Modifying the royalty numbers, not really until you prove it. And it's
Very
and it's built in. 5,000 and above, your royalty rates change.
change.
10,000 and above, your royalty rates change.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Keziah and Egusa. So let's look to the future now, right? So how do you see royalty structures evolving in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you think might change?
For me, if I may,
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
I think in terms of um, where the middleman, in this case, the publisher, is increasingly being pulled aside, and authors are able to deal directly with certain websites. You might find the idea that if Kindle Direct Publishing is royalty is now embedded in it's a terms of service. It's no longer something you negotiate. You put your book up there, you make a lot of noise, which is easier to make now. You can become
Mm,
a troll on Twitter, and your books sell and you're earning direct. In terms of in practice, what we are trying to do, especially on the continent, given the difficulty of cross-border transactions, is that, and it's related to sales too, is that we're beginning to instead license our titles to each other across
mm,
borders. We're licensing our titles to each other, and the royalty agreements are embedded therein. So the author who is Kenyan, whose publisher has struck a deal with us in Nigeria, we're paying royalties care of the author to the publisher for him to get his money. We're doing the same thing for the Ghanaian. Doing the same thing. It's early days. It hasn't really happened, but conversations have been ongoing for a few months now, where
mm,
all it takes is for somebody brave to pull the trigger and say, you know what, give us the title. Let's work out an agreement. Let the lawyers discuss. So it's in those spaces that I see. Then, of course, financial reporting standards. Because the difficulty for publishers, this is important. The difficulty for publishers is the ability to know when you've made a sale. When you
mm,
shipped a book, it's not when you sold it.
mhm,
It is when because in Nigeria you can raise invoice. Trust me, in about 6 months' time, the bookseller will bring it back and say, "Oh boy, it did not sell, and some would have bleached it. You'll have to convert. You've already paid royalties on those books." No, when you've made a sale, most accounting software will have an invoice as the sale, but instead there's an ability to filter for closed invoices, which is when the invoice has been fully paid up. That is when the royalties kick in. Some software do it line by line item. So each time a payment is made and you apply to the correct invoices, the royalty report drops in. So you will
mm,
find that in the future, more publishers will soon start investing in software that goes into that intricate detail. Um, QuickBooks, QuickBooks doesn't.
mm,
QuickBooks actually handles in terms of invoice by invoice. It is adequate, but at least you can close an invoice. You can go back and pull out and be able to and pull out line items and raise a new one. So you can disclose that invoice and pay the authors. But
mm,
it's in those little spaces. It's operational. It's in the operation. Getting a cheap accounting software that can do line by line item so that your royalty reports are kind of automated. You can just filter for closed sales and generate a royalty report. Or having somebody who can do the spreadsheet work and work with it, it's hell. It's really difficult to do. It's in those spaces that we are beginning to find solutions that work for us.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Keziah.
To add on, I think so in the next 5 to 10 years, I think global distribution will become even more seamless.
Mm,
I sit here and I think I ordered a book that's published by Narrative Landscapes of Amazon, and I expected to get the Narrative Landscapes version, but then they gave me the version of PRH, and I was like, okay. Mainly because it's quite difficult, especially for Africa. to
Yeah.
get things across individual countries. So I can sit here and buy a book from Amazon and it's cheaper than if I want to get it from Nigeria. Probably
Mm.
because I'm buying a block of books.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think in the next 10 years, it should become seamless because there are a lot of across country trade in Africa. Hopefully the Africa free trade market will become more active and then we can get easier ways of doing business with each other. So I think that is going to happen. I believe that is going to happen, and it will standardize a lot of things across various African countries, and then we can deal with each other a lot more.
Mm.
Also, I think cross-media um, publishing or having books in various formats is going to be huge in the next 5 to 10 years, especially because of the generation that is coming up, and largely because most of this new generation are on mainly their phones and tablets, and we may have to reach them there even more than we are doing that now. Um, and books are going to be adapted in so many other ways, films, TV shows, even video games. And it's going to create different streams of revenue for publishers and authors. And I believe that area is going to grow a lot more than it is now.
Thank you. Thank you, Keziah. So my very last question is about okay. So basically, what's your last word on the topic of royalties? And what's the first or what's the last thing you want authors and publishers to know when navigating royalty agreements?
Dr. Egosa can go first.
Yeah, you
Okay.
can go first and then either way.
Royalties are the heart of the author-publisher relationship.
Yeah.
A fair and transparent system benefits everyone, ensuring authors are rewarded for their creativity and publishers can sustain their business.
Mm.
I believe the way forward lies in embracing innovation, fostering trust, and maintaining open communications. It's important that conversations like this continue. It's important that people keep to realistic expectations, both in terms of what they expect and both in terms of what they think they can give. And that's why what Kezia said at the beginning, educating both parties leads to really, really seamless negotiations, leads to really, really reasonable parties. Because once you know the industry, you're able to know what you're actually going to be negotiating. And there's nothing as beautiful as well-earned expectations. So that you don't go and say plan that you're going to build house based on this, or you don't go and plan that you're going to pay royalties and make sales based on this. You temper it, you watch it, and you are pleasantly surprised when the beautiful rare thing happens. It's important to know that less than 50% of authors are able to earn back their advances in a
Mm.
5-year cycle. It just doesn't happen within the term of a contract. But the publishing industry is so weird in that it all it needs is one unicorn to carry the weight of 20 authors. It's one of the weirdest industries. The day you stop producing those 20 authors, you will never discover the one that will pay for all 20. So it's a weird industry. And
Yeah.
once you understand that as an author, your job is just keep on creating, focus on that, and be reassured that a new publishing industry is developing. Watch out for the red flags, but trust us, the market already knows. Reputationally, the bad publishers are beginning to weed themselves out. It's inevitable. Just
Mm.
take care of yourself and educate yourself, and the industry will take care of
Very true. Couldn't have said it better, Keziah.
Yeah, very well said. So one thing I would tell maybe new authors is the publisher is your friend and you're there to help you make your book sell.
Mm.
Uh, it's a lot more work doing it on your own, but think of the publisher as someone who has done this over and over again, knows where to go, which doors to knock, to ensure that your books sell. So trusting that the publisher has your best interest at heart is one of the first things.
Yeah.
And well, they would say not every publisher would do that, but most publishers lately have the author's best interest at heart. Because if the book does well, it's good for the publisher as well. So they wouldn't bamboozle you just so that they make a lot of money and then you don't. Because if they didn't have your book, um, I mean, there goes their name as well.
Mhm.
Also, yeah, educate yourself. I mean, if you want to be an author, if you want to be a writer, educate yourself. Learn
Yeah.
everything you need to know about the publishing industry. Read and understand the agreement terms and negotiate. The publisher is there to negotiate with you. If you just accept the terms and go your merry way, they'll be happy. If you can read and ask questions and
Yeah.
negotiate, that's the best thing that can happen to the both of you. So that would be it for me.
Isaiah, Egosa, thank you very much. This was a very insightful conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you both, and I'm sure that our audience, when this is published in the newsletter, will learn a lot from everything we've discussed here. As we said in the beginning, royalties are they're very tricky, I guess, in the publishing world. But I think one thing that has come out of this conversation is just the fact that um, pretty much publishers tend to follow very familiar blueprints for every contract. So I think that in its own way is reassuring for authors. So there's not a lot of confusion, whether in the negotiation process or on the back end of the accounting um, process. It's also been great, Keziah, to learn so much about what's going on in the Ghanaian publishing industry. I personally am very interested in, I'd be interested to know more about how publishing works or is working currently in Ghana and all of that. So it's really been great talking to you.
We're
Thank you.
actually learning from Nigeria, so
Yeah. Sorry?
we're actually learning from Nigeria a lot.
Well,
Nigeria and from Kenya.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. So thank you again for your time. And I'd also like to thank Faith Ogochukwu Amuli and the entire team at Narrative Landscape and KNX for putting this together. This was very enjoyable. I hope we see each other again soon to talk about yet another interesting topic in publishing and in the business of publishing and creativity. So thank you so much again for your time. Thank you, Agosa. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Isaiah. And see you soon.